And as usual, on Fridays, every Friday, it's Friday with Carole. Carole Moore. Welcome, Carole. How are you doing?
Oh, it's been a good week. No
Yep.
snow and the sun's shining. That's all we
Yup.
can ask.
Yep, absolutely. That's all we can ask.
That's it.
So, what do we got going on for this morning?
Well, there's so much going on in the news right now, and a lot of people have approached me. And so I want to talk about firearms safety, and protection, personal protection.
Right.
I am a life member of the National Rifle Association. The National Rifle Association has been around for 150 years, educating people about safe firearms. Now everybody hears, oh, NRA, National Rifle Association. They hear negative connotations about it, oh, that they're just a lobbyist. Well, they're not. They actually are more interested in safety and educating people with firearms. And so that's what I'm here to talk about today. A lot of people don't know the difference between different firearms. They don't know the difference in the ammo. They don't know the laws, and we live in New Jersey, so New Jersey
Yeah.
laws are very strict with
Very
firearms.
strict.
Yeah, and so that's what we're going to talk about.
And I just want to throw, the gun thing is very interesting. And, for a while, I used to be just like, everybody out there in the public and saying get the guns off the streets, or blah blah blah, and same thing you said, and I really started doing some research, and quite honestly, a lot of the guns that you see in the news and the murders and everything are unregistered guns. Most of those guns are in the black market, and that's how these kids are getting a hold of them. You know, there is some incidences where licensed, registered people who have guns do bad things, but it's so far in between versus the daily stuff that happens. You know what I mean? So,
Well, if you believe the media, you would believe that that is true, that we have an epidemic of deaths by firearms. However, the truth of the matter is, when I teach, and I get the FBI crime statistics, and I get the New Jersey State crime statistics, and it comes in a form that's easy for me to teach my students. It's a pie graph. Do you realize that more people die from lightning strikes than from firearms? Do you realize more people drowned by 400% more than are killed by firearms? And do you realize more doctors kill people by 800% more than firearms? And automobiles kill 400 times more people than a firearm. But because newspapers and the media have to try to sell newspapers, etc., they go for the drama. And they have an entire society of people who are thinking that, everybody is getting killed by firearms. Now, I grew up in Willingboro on my family farm, and I was probably 10 or 12 when I had to take my turn sitting with a .22 rifle at the back window, because Daddy would have just planted the corn, and we had to take turns, and every time a skunk or a raccoon would come out and dig up the kernel before it could even start to grow, we used a .22 to ping them in the behind and sting them, and they'd be gone. And now that doesn't sound very very dangerous, does it? I'm
No.
sitting in a window in the backyard of my house on a farm with a .22, waiting for the little buggers to come and steal the corn. But that's the way it was when you were on a farm. Everybody on a farm had a firearm, because you had animals that would destroy your crops, and this was totally acceptable. Now, of course, the law here in New Jersey is that we've had a big problem with overcrowding. In other words, you can no longer expend a firearm in your city limits. I live in Edgewater Park, okay, and we had an incident recently where a deer ran across the street and was hit.
Mm-hmm.
And my neighbor called up, and she's a foreign lady, and she said, I think you have one of your goats is sick in my backyard. Well, it wasn't one of my goats from the farm. It was actually a deer with a compound fracture front and back that needed to be euthanized. Euthanize is a nice word of being put out of its misery, okay? And so, of course, since we know the laws, because we're hunter ed instructors and we're NRA members, we know the law, we obey the law to the 10th degree, we called the police department and told them we have an animal, and the police officer said to my husband, go ahead, you're in the hunter business, I just go after people. So we, in essence, had to euthanize this animal and put it out of its misery, okay? And those are the things that are caused by overpopulation. We have too many people in New Jersey, okay? However, what people don't realize is that we have more deer on the northeast coast than were here when William Penn was here 300 years ago.
Wow.
Now, why? Well, you've got 295, you've got New Jersey Turnpike, you've got the Garden State Parkway, all of these that are running up and down the state of New Jersey, and mostly they have fences on sides. And what that does is that keeps the animal from being able to migrate to its normal eating patterns, and we have a ton of deer who actually starve to death.
Really?
Because they can't get from here to there because of the highway, and if they try to go across the highway, they can jump a 6-foot fence, that's no problem, deer are very agile that way. But as they, jump across, then they got 6 lanes of highway to run across before they get to their next grazing area. So we actually have a big problem, and there are a lot of people that love animals, and no one loves animals more than me. I have a home for Weirwood Farm animals. I have a farm. Everybody is taken care of very well. But people who don't know, don't understand that the worst thing you can do for an animal is not to harvest it. Harvesting it means, yes, you're taking its life, but you're keeping it from having not enough food and starving to death, which is a very horrible way to die, you know. But more or less, that's the hunting aspect of it, and people don't understand that, so maybe that'll help some people to realize that you're actually doing them a favor by not letting them suffer. I would never let an animal suffer. But the firearms in New Jersey, and what we're going to show you now, happens to be a shotgun. Now, everybody, because I teach women's safety as well, you're going to notice this is a long arm, okay, and we'll sit it right here. And there are 2 rules about a firearm that you must keep in your mind at all times. Number 1 is always treat a firearm as if it's loaded, okay? Now, I know this is not unloaded, or that this is not loaded, but do you know it's not loaded?
No.
You cannot see that there's something in the barrel, okay?
Nope.
So you always treat every firearm as if it's unloaded. Keith, did you notice where it's pointing?
Away from us.
It's always pointing in a safe direction. Now, when I teach this course, everybody says to me, okay, yeah, well, I'll just carry it over my shoulder and aim it up, and that's a safe direction. I said, oh, is that a safe direction if you live in a 2-story house and your kids are upstairs in the bed upstairs? Oh, well, then I'll face it down. I said, oh, and so your father's working in the basement on the tools and you're facing it down? Not. So this is a variable that changes constantly.
Right.
You always have to be aware where it has been. Now, number 1, the next thing you have to be aware of is know your target and beyond, okay? Now, when my husband was in Africa this last trip on hunting for big animals, he, being trained as a firearm instructor here in New Jersey, when the guide said to him, well, there's one right there, can you see it? And Bill said, yeah, I can see it, a little brown patch behind a bush. And immediately Bill said, but how do I know that if I miss that shot, what's behind that animal that I could injure unnecessarily?
Right.
And the guide said to him, well, Mr. Moore, we're on 550,000 acres, and we're the only ones hunting today, so you don't have to worry about that in Africa. But in New Jersey, we do.
Absolutely.
And when people ask me, they say, well, what type of a firearm should I use for personal safety? Okay? And this is my baby. This is what I would use for personal safety, and it is a shotgun. And the reason it is a shotgun, why I would use it, is number 1, put this right down here, you have to understand the mechanism of the firearms, what's coming out the end, all right? Some people call it a bullet. We call it a projectile. It just makes it a little more pleasant, right? And you have one that is actually a plastic tube with a brass cap on the end. And it's actually crimped. And inside this little plastic tube is powder, gunpowder, to make it expend, a wad, which is just a piece of cotton or cardboard, and pellets, like if you've ever had
BB gun.
or if you've ever had ball bearings, okay? And that's all packed in here, okay? Now people say, oh, I don't want to touch it, it could blow up. Well, no, it actually is a center fire, and you'll see at the base, you'll see you actually have to hit that center only to make it. So hitting and dropping it, it can't expand. You've got a rim around it, okay? And the reason you want to use this in your home safety is because it has 70 pellets, depending on the size, okay? And the 70 pellets will take out your intruder, okay? But it will not go through the wall into your neighbor's house. That's why you never use anything that's called a rifle. Now this is an expended shell. This is empty, okay? And you'll see it's brass.
Yep.
And it shoots out a solid projectile. And it's with a rifled barrel, as opposed to the shotgun, which you just aim in that direction and pull
Just
the trigger.
sprays it.
And it does a wide pattern. It takes care of your problem, okay?
Right.
But the brass shells, okay, that's one projectile. And the way houses are made today, with such shoddy materials and such thin wallboard and a little bit of insulation and then an aluminum siding on the outside, it will not stop a rifle slug. So rifles are not to be used as your home self-protection, because you don't want to take out the neighbor
Right.
as well.
You know, Carol, on that thought, let's go to a quick commercial break, and we're going to come right back with some more.
Okay, very good.